you everyone for allowing us to be here. I'm sure it's been a very long morning for everybody, but I think we're all amongst friends, colleagues, and like-minded people. So I think what I'd like to do is make this a little bit more informal, to have an open conversation, to allow everyone to be engaged in this discussion. Instead of us constantly speaking about a specific perspective, we are amongst friends. So maybe what I'll do is begin really just to put some context into it, and then allow the different individuals here to speak about their different experiences. So really, when we talk about arts and culture in the Gulf, as a person that's been practicing in the field of cultural development, doing exhibitions globally, it is profound the type of feedback and respect that we get about the region. Whether we're countering stereotypes or being able to create more progressive collaborations, but really looking at our identity as a form of collectiveness, looking at our roots and heritage as a source of inspiration, and more importantly, our region as a form of collectiveness, whether we look at places such as Beirut, Cairo, Rabat, all of these centers for culture that now keep transcending and evolving. And what Abu Dhabi has recently done is, in particular with the Louvre project, looking at a broader perspective of civilization and using the medium of art as something that brings people together. Equally, institutions within the UAE, whether it's the Abu Dhabi Art annual event, whether it's the Sheikh Salama Foundation, Sharjah Biennale, and Al Sirkal Avenue. These are some of institutional examples, but of course you have other individuals very active within the field. So I think this topic is very important. It's very important in the context of global development. It's very important in particular today, and it touches on everyone's life, and it becomes a more engaging medium for collaboration. So again, I'll just briefly introduce myself. My name is Rashid bin Shabib. I've been practicing in the field of culture development, architecture, urban planning, design. More recently, I have joined His Excellency Zaki Nusseibeh as part of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that looks after how we can build and bring national institutions to global missions and try to present the UAE beyond the known field and try to get them involved within the field of culture. So that is what I've been doing. I am amongst friends and colleagues that I know. I'll start off with Omar Shunnar, who just started this social initiative that looks at looking at innovation and how it can bridge that forward. Mohammed Hafiz is an old friend of ours, and he owns Athr Gallery, representing one of the most wonderful artists out of Saudi Arabia. And more recently, I met Sofana Dahlan from Tashkeil and the wonderful initiatives that she's been doing. So I'll start off as I see the clock ticking. What I'd like to do is try to make it a group participation and try to get questions involved, but maybe everyone can give a brief perspective of them practicing in the field over the past few years and talking about the work that they do. Who wants to?
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, and perhaps maybe you can touch on the project, Omar, as well.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
First of all, Assalamu alaikum. Very nice to be amongst friends and colleagues and in this very dynamic exchange of thought. Rashid has us on a very tight clock, so I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. I've started with my partner, Hamza Sayrafi, a contemporary art space / gallery 10 years ago. And the reason of starting Athr came from a lack of representation and presence for Saudi art, both locally and internationally. And we structured the space and the project in a way that works very close with the artist in the way that it develops their careers. It looks at their exposure. It looks at how they take their next steps, where they show, how they do their work, produce it. So we work very, very closely with the artists. We don't behave like a traditional gallery per se. And 5 years ago, I've been part of the creation of the Saudi Art Council, which is a social project, a private social project that promotes Saudi art both locally and internationally. So it creates several touch points with international art practitioners, and we'd invite you all to please come and attend our week in February. We also engage with schools and students on average, in our main event, we attract 25,000 students from public schools in Jeddah. And recently, we miss Omar Ghabash, who should have joined our panel today. But we have also worked on a project with him based on a book he wrote called The Letters to a Young Muslim that we personally feel very close to. He wrote a book that contained 28 letters addressed to his teenage son, Saif, who struggles with identifying with where he's from. He struggles with the stereotypes. At the age of 16 and 17, we realize that our kids, our teenagers, go to study abroad, and they don't know how to process most of the questions they come across. And Omar wrote the book, tackled very important issues. I read through the book and felt that it could be converted into a visual art exhibition. We did that. Part of it is shown in the warehouse 421 in Abu Dhabi. And we felt from these different moments, the creation of Athr, the Saudi Art Council, and lately this exhibition, that we're touching on many different levels, both locally, internationally, and bridging the expectations and the stereotypes, or the way people perceive us and the way we perceive ourselves. And we see that as a continuity of our culture and heritage, taking it into a contemporary context. And I'll cut it here. And
I highly recommend that you visit Athr Gallery's website and look at the wonderful project. I mean, the short brief is wonderful, but I might come back and ask a few questions about it. Omar, maybe you can tell us more recently. Omar is a close friend, but recently he's been very excited about Jsoor and the initiatives around Jsoor. Maybe you can explain a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, first of all, assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me on this. For myself, I'm just going to get very personal for a minute and just talk about what arts and culture actually meant for me personally. And on that note, I'd like to also thank some people that inspired me in the process. 3 years ago, prior to that, I was a different person, and arts and culture has played a transformative role in my life. It has made me, as I see it, a better person. The ability to empathize, the ability to understand, the ability to have dialogue. So I come to this from a very personal perspective, and it's a subject that's very dear to my heart. In terms of background, I am a corporates guy. I have spent the last 22 years working in the UAE and in Singapore, in government, in public sector and private sector. The last 10 years of which I was at a CEO level and having a good job, but it didn't relate to me, what I was doing. Arts and culture and the creative industry meant a lot to me, and that was what I was passionate about. And it is on that note that I started Jsoor, a social initiative to try to that aims to help grow the creative industry in the region. I was motivated and pushed by my friends in Kuwait, in Nuqat. I went to one of their talks, highly advisable to go to anybody. And it, brown book as well, which you guys did, it really pushed me. So that is me in a nutshell, and I'm very connected to the subject matter today. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Sofana Dahlan. I'm from Saudi Arabia. Basically, I am, up until 10 years ago, I would never identify myself as a creative or part of the creative industry because I'm a lawyer. And ironically, going in Saudi Arabia, at an early stage, and I think Mohammed would relate, creativity is really, it's buried really early as you're going through the education system. You have a lot of limitation on where your creativity would go. So I've never identified myself to be creative in any way or any form. After graduating from university, my first obstacle was I was not recognized as a lawyer in my country, so I had to find opportunities elsewhere, one of which was in Kuwait. and in Egypt and Lebanon, and I worked as a legal consultant. Of course, because I'm not a certified lawyer, I was given boring, what they considered to be boring and not exciting cases. At that time, they called it the entertainment industry. So I dealt with a lot of cases that has to do with IP. And ironically as well, I love documenting and studying patterns. So the more cases that came on board, I just saw that it's always the creative that is signing a very unjust conditions in these contracts. And this is where something sparked in me, and I said, why are they doing that? Let me meet some of these. Although I was representing the other side, but I started meeting these people, and I started understanding that they view life and they see things from a completely different prism. But I've also identified that they have a lacking of understanding and a lack of knowledge in legal and business knowledge, which is why they always go into these relationships or these contracts that are not in their favor on the long term. So I proposed to my boss that, I don't think we should take this to litigation. I believe that litigation is going to consume a lot of time, so why don't we do it through mediation? And solving it through mediation actually made my boss a lot of money, but in the same time, we always resolved the problem amicably, and we made a lot of friends, and actually the business started growing more. After that, I started thinking that maybe we should do a pre-conflict solutions. So I started giving workshop on how to read your contracts.
Where was this, in Mecca?
In Kuwait and Lebanon and Egypt.
Okay.
It was like between these three cities. And these workshops were very, in the beginning it was a great failure because I wanted to teach people law the way I learned it in Cairo University. However, as you all know, creative people don't have the attention span, nor, they only scan the paper. They don't know what it means. So I had to work with a lot of artists and designers to transform this boring content into illustrations and stories, and would take them through a great story of a lady called Consignment. And at one point, I said, this is making more money than my boring job as a lawyer, so why don't I just forget the dream of being a lawyer, go back to Saudi Arabia, open Tashkeil, which is a platform to enable creative. A lot of people didn't understand what we do because I didn't understand what I do. I just knew that I want to enable creatives. So, but by time we started realizing that what we were doing is 3 steps that would actually create the platform of creating. So we detect talents through doing Behance portfolio reviews, and then we take them through capacity building workshop, mainly to try to polish that talent into a sustainable business. And then after that, create some events to kind of put the community, and the events, Mohammed would know, pre-2015 was a great challenge. A lot of my events was literally after Jum'ah prayer, where all religious clerks were basically having lunch. So I would finish the event very quickly and shut it down before they even go to Salat al-Asr. So at that phase, I started realizing that a lot of the problems today is really not only on the person himself, but as also the community. The societies view creativity as a hobby and not as a profession. And this is where we are today witnessing the change. Yes. And then we started working with government on building strategies for creative industry. I was appointed as the Deputy Governor for SME Authority, put a lot of laws out, such as co-working spaces mandate and creative industry enablement instruments. So just as in a nutshell what we do today, my company actually joined a consortium that works on safeguarding intangible culture in Saudi, and they're working mainly in Al-Madinah Al-Munawwara. And that's it in a nutshell.
That's wonderful. Maybe what we'll do is we'll get straight to questions, and I'll be selfish enough to ask the first question, and just maybe everybody can just take a minute or two just to give their perspective. I think a lot of people internationally or regionally are looking at the way we deal with identity, and we deal with globalization, and we deal with social media. In your context, in your practicing field, do you find that to be important, relevant, nostalgic? How does identity play in the context of as you develop, and in particular in the context of the broader region? Because as everyone knows, the region's cultural capitals tend to shift. Everybody knows Cairo, Baghdad, Beirut. Everyone's going through their various challenges since the region has always stemmed from these various problems. But ultimately, we see this coming back to the Gulf fold. And I'd like to hear your opinion, maybe about how this affects.
I think, if I may, the region. 1 minute? Oh my God.
Sorry.
That's too much pressure. I think the region itself, although it's different countries today, we have so much similarity, and we complement each other. And I've seen it when we did the exhibition with Omar's book. Reading into the book, I've seen social dynamics that was happening in the Emirates in the 70s and the 80s that were exactly the same as the Saudi one. And to me, that was a discovery. I didn't expect that to be the case. And when you look at identity, I think we share a very, very close identity, and we complement the activities happening between countries. And the challenge that we go through today with our youth is that this identity, the definition of identity in the region and globally is kind of quite dynamic and evolving. So with social media exposure, visibility on, the Black Panther and what have you, so our expectations and the way we approach life, or maybe this generation, the way they're approaching life is somewhat detaching them from the roots. So one of the most important elements or tasks we have is kind of building on that identity in a contemporary way. So bringing it up to the par of staying true to who we are, understanding what we are and what we stand for, and representing that in a contemporary light.
And you felt that the exhibition of Omar represented that, gave it that?
Yes. No, I went through the exhibition. We've done some school visits back home to the exhibition. Now, the part you see here is only 1/5 of it. We look forward to showing the whole thing. But 16-year-olds, my son who's 16, for the first time, like he's this 16-year-old who's into gaming, big time. Never into the gallery exhibitions and never enjoyed them, though I take them all the time. With the exception of this one, he related. He wanted to go through each and every work. He wanted the explanation. He was engaged. He realized that this comes from a genuine place. He struggles with his language. He doesn't know to identify. We speak in English today in Abu Dhabi, and they speak English most of the time in their normal conversations. They never text me in Arabic, and they don't get that. Why is it not my language? Or what has happened? The gender separation and the female-male situation in Saudi and the Gulf, that's now a kind of a barrier that's being lifted, but it has to be lifted. Everything has to evolve based on those roots. Currently, he follows the Katy Perrys and Justin Biebers of the world, and he's inspired by all the celebrities. But we have to create our own celebrities, our own legacies that are based on our own roots, and take that forward and become relevant globally.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the most important things is whenever you travel and you ask people, where you're from, and you tend to tell them where you're from, and the first thing they say, well, flashy buildings and everything else. And I think arts and culture has allowed us, as a region, as a people, to be able to tell our story. We've been, I think, very effective on this. We've been able to take that dialogue and use platforms such as Expo to be able to bring important themes such as mobility and some of these important topics and bring them down here and have that dialogue. We've been able to use the pavilion, which I think the UAE was the first Gulf country to have in the Biennale in 2009, to be able to engage up to 500,000 people, to be able to tell our version of what our culture is. So I think from our perspective, and of course, this is just what we've been doing recently. We've been doing this for a very long time. What Charge has been doing.
So kind of redefining our identity to counter stereotypes globally.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know,
Using
the great
culture.
work that Charge has been doing, Sarkal, Abu Dhabi, Saudi, I mean, I think this is where we have been able to transform the role of arts and culture in the region.
Sofana.
Well, when you think about identity, it's such a complex topic. And relating it to culture is even making it more complex. But let me define identity from my perspective. I think identity from my perspective is how I define myself and how others view me based on what I feel relevant to me. So looking at a lot of what many people would actually, I mean, being a Saudi woman would actually, there is so much stereotypical things about who you should be and what you should wear. But my identity was always global. But in the same time, appreciating my abaya, for example, I love it. For me, it's comfortable, it's convenient, it's colorful, I put it on, I take it off. So it is part of my identity. Now, would it be the part of my daughter's identity? I don't know. I can't judge at the moment. But it will always remain part of my cultural heritage, whether my daughter likes it or not.
Does it matter, in your opinion?
Yes, it does matter, because if you look today, you know, the most important thing that we need to understand that culture brings on board is that it allows diversity, but it brings unity within the diversity. You know, if you accept me to be different and you appreciate me and I appreciate your uniqueness, but in the same time we contribute to a humanity culture or heritage, then we're building room for dialogue and discussions and a bridge to learn about each other. I think it's very important today to document and safeguard and understand that even the tools and mediums that were used, for example, my grandmother she didn't witness social media, but she did say the stories her ways. And I think a fundamental part of my culture was her stories and her voice, you know, with saying these stories like, you know, as the sound of the foot steps of a woman with coins in her pockets is different than the sound of a footstep of a woman without coins in her pocket, which was really a big foundation of financial independence. You know, you have to have very heavy pockets and make a big sound so people would actually hear you. So these stories should be manifested again, but maybe not with the medium of my grandmother saying the story, but actually an artwork, a illustration, a cartoon, a tweet. I don't know. I mean, the mediums are changing, but the content should always stay there and evolve, as Mohammed has stated.
So everyone's arguing that identity plays an important role. It's not just a blanketed.
No.
Good. Me too. I agree. But you promised me 1 minute, and that was not 1 minute.
Okay.
So maybe what I'll do is open up questions, perhaps. Is that the question? Yeah.
This is the question box.
Machine.
Yeah, machine, yes. Here.
Oh.
Speak to that?
Speak to it.
Oh, okay. I want to touch up on a point that you mentioned, that I think one of the major problems this generation has is that the art and culture is actually a hobby rather than a career. So I personally believe, I've been here for 20 years, I've seen the cultural scene expand and get better, but I really think that we should get into schools and educate the younger generation and sort of teach them that this is okay, maybe by doing some programs, because our children do not know how valuable this is and do not have too many options. All these like exhibitions that happen, parents don't make the effort into dragging their kids into exhibitions or activities, teaching them about other cultures. So I really think that there has to be some interference through school from the ministry, or I don't know how you feel about that.
Okay, I'll give you an experience we've done in my company. We go on Yom al-Mihna, Career Day, to kindergarten, and every year we chose a profession in the creative industry to talk to them about it. So we picked an artist, and we started demonstrating that within the art industry, who wants to be the gallery owner, who wants to be the artist, who wants to be the representative of the artist. And we gave them roles, and then they all started painting paintings. What we discovered is something interesting, that kids, if you put them in this environment of an industry and you explain their roles, they excel. There was this little boy, we told him that the cost of the paper is this much and this is how much, and the gallery owner is going to take 1 riyal from you. And this one boy, I think he is a Hadrami or a Qasimi. So anyways, this young boy, he actually, when the parents bought their children art, so each parent bought the art. So this boy, we came and we said, okay, this is your 10 riyals, but I, as a gallery owner, we're taking 1 riyal from you. He cried. He threw a tantrum. He manifested so many things, and then he said, but you didn't do anything. So it's interesting to see. You just need to give them that context and make it fun, and describe that you can make money out of it. Yes.
Okay.
If I may add one comment into that, I totally agree of showing them what has to be done or what can they do in the creative industries. But I think the creative industries is a complete ecosystem.
Yes.
So you can do education, but they have to realize that there is maybe an industry out there, an institution that will support them, a collector that will buy their work, a gallery that will support their practice, and a school, a university that will teach the profession. So we have to make sure, and this is a discussion we've been having in a very insightful entrepreneurship workshop for the past 2 days, is how to really create that value chain, a complete value chain. Because if it doesn't happen holistically, and this is what we're seeing in a place like Abu Dhabi, where the Louvre is coming, the Guggenheim is coming, galleries are popping up, Dubai, there's the art fair. So it has to be a complete value chain. If they're interested but they can't find their place in the industry, or they don't make money, why would they do it as a full-time job?
Yes, absolutely.
I just want to.
I'm mindful of the time, but if anybody, we can.
Can I just?
There's a couple more questions
We can
here,
go-
but if you,
I just want a
keep
quick
a brief
interjection on that.
response. Yeah, keep it.
Oh, just a very quick interjection on that. I think the creative industry is very important here. In the UK, for example, it generated approximately 92 billion pounds in 2016, and about 2 million people work in that workforce. Like he said, it's an entire ecosystem. The music, arts, and culture scene generated about 8.2 billion, which is about 9%. So it's a very big industry, and I think more investment is on its way in this. I think the government in the UAE, as well as in Saudi, appreciate that. They're opening up, for example, in Saudi with the film sector. So I think that's going to come as more investments come in.
Are we able to take 2 more questions or 1 more question? Yeah, you can go. Are we able to take?
Okay, it must be very, very brief.
Yes, with no doubt, UAE has a big advantage in this big cultural revolution related to contemporary high practices. So you have a great advantage. But I am very curious about the awakening of Saudi Arabia. I would love to know about 2 internal events in your society that we're still ignoring that make your explosion Please tell us when this, with Prince Mohammed Salman, exactly, start. What make you react and position yourself with your brothers in this big revolution? Internal.
Just a quick point. Are we able to take more questions, or is that
No,
the statement?
that's the last
That's
question.
the last question.
Yeah.
And then maybe just a brief statement from either.
You want to go ahead?
Well, the thing is, you need to know that there has always been a creative industry in Saudi. This was not. It was just not. It was not publicized. The underground community of artists, designers, and so on, they were all there. Before 79, it was out there in the public, but pre-79, it was just a hush-hush kind of industry, but it was there. There were people holding the, taking that responsibility, but they were not publicizing it. What happened with Prince Mohammed bin Salman announcing the 2030 vision created the platform and the courage for a lot of these movements and initiatives to surface up and start showcasing what they're doing. There is, nobody can deny that the need for diversifying our economy and the prices of oil played a very fundamental role in taking these drastic, and very courageous decision. But it was always there. And I've seen it. I don't know, Mohammed maybe can build on that.
And just a few sentences. Like Sofana said, it's always been there, and it's always been quite impactful on many creative industries. But it was mostly offline.
Yes.
Or online, whatever you.
Okay, we really have 60 seconds.
I have a very quick question. I'm Nora Halpern from the US. And at the center of the creative industries really are the creatives, are the makers and the artists. So my question to you is, are there artists who are part of this decision-making process, and is there a way for artists in this region to be elevated to a professional level where they're seen as a profession?
There are, indeed there is. So in the formulation of one of the new entities in Saudi Arabia that's called the General Cultural Authority, within the board of directors and the leading directors of that authority, a professor in theater is appointed, a visual artist, a filmmaker, beside 4 state ministers. So that's a clear demonstration of how the government today is approaching the arts and creative industries by forming these new entities, whether it's the Culture Authority, the MISC Foundation. Ahmed Mater is now leading the MISC Art Institute, which has been very active in the past several months. So yes, artists, creatives, and incubators, entrepreneurs in the art and cultural sector are empowered.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone. I'm sure we're out of time, but we're available to answer any questions after this session if anybody wants to.
You guys were great.
Thank you.
And thank you very, very much. And we're going to move, we're now moving into a very, very interesting part of Culture Summit. It's new territory for us. We've got 2 theater pieces, one before lunch and one after lunch. Then we've got the Louvre, and then we've got this evening some music, but we have this movie, Kailash. He is going to be there, and a discussion about the movie. All of this could not have been done without some help from our friends at the Sundance Institute. And one of those friends, Philip Himberg, who directs the Sundance Institute's theater programs, is going to introduce what's going to happen next. So Philip, why don't you come on down in the dark. Thank you very much.
All right, what an extraordinary conversation we just witnessed. I want to thank Carla and David for making and bringing together this remarkably eclectic group of people. It's really been astonishing. And I hope you're ready now for some good old-fashioned storytelling. The Sundance Institute, as I hope you know, maybe some of you know and some of you do not know, is all about storytellers, because we profoundly believe that in the hands of our culture's gifted storytellers, there lies a path that illuminates truths. Truths of being human, of living in complex and painful and paradoxical times, And through film, new media, and theater, we create narratives that connect us. And so this relationship between the storyteller and the listener is really, really a sacred thing. I like to say that the story isn't made by the storyteller speaking, and it's not made by the audience in the seats here. It's made in the space in between. We make it together, which is what makes theater so active and exciting. Robert Redford, our founder, you may know, started the Sundance Institute in the early 1980s, and he was a man of the theater as well as a film actor and film star and director and producer. And so he started the Sundance Institute Theater program alongside the Sundance Film Laboratories. Today, Sundance is happy to present two very different readings. One before lunch, as David said. This will be about 30 minutes, and then a short one after lunch. The first is from a remarkable writer who has attended both the film labs at Sundance and the theater labs. At the film lab, she developed a script that went on to be nominated for an Academy Award, Beasts of the Southern Wild. Remarkable film. If you haven't seen it, I'm sure you can download it on one platform or another. But at the theater lab, we hosted Lucy in a support of a series of stories she was writing that took a peek at her own growing up in the southern part of America. And when I first read her work, I thought, wow, this is like a new generation of Flannery O'Connor, a great Gothic Southern writer. But today, watching Volker's amazing flip book, I thought that the flip books, in some ways, also connected very much to the way in which Lucy puts words together and looks deeply into the human spirit. Throw Me on the Burn Pile and Light Me Up had its world premiere after its Sundance incubation at the Mark Taper Forum, Kirk Douglas Theater in Los Angeles, and I'm very proud to announce it's coming up for its New York premiere at Lincoln Center Theater in August, so if any of you happen to be through New York, you can see the whole piece. But here to read just two selections from the full evening of work, please welcome the one and only Lucy Abbar.
I try not to fall over. Hi, everybody. Hey. Hi, Boo. Hello. Hi, I'm testing out the mic while is this too loud? Okay. And I'm so sorry because, do I stand here or do I stand here? Here, okay. All right, thank you all so much for being here for this. I know there's a lot of intellectual heavy hitters, so maybe this will be a nice break. So these are a series of short stories that I tell on the stage about growing up with my dad in the Florida Panhandle. These are going to be two pieces that are, sort of from the middle of it, but I guess the information you would need to know is, so my dad's a criminal defense attorney, and he specializes in death penalty cases. And so I grew up helping him in his office, doing a lot of, because he worked from home, and so I would end up doing a lot of his legal secretary work because he had a hard time keeping a secretary because he has a big personality. I guess the only other thing I would say is my brother is named, he's named after my dad, so people just call him the son of Baya, or just the son of. And I'm just gonna read. The first piece is called Part of Your Education. Every morning, when the light outside is a bright August orange, me and my dad are the first people on the earth awake, and the cows across the fence just watch us as we run. It's cold in the field, but I'm sweating already. My dad holds up his hand and says, "At ease," and that means it's time for our push-ups. I do my push-ups United States Army style, with my elbows squeezing in. And Daddy says, "Good form, boss." So I go harder. My dad says, "Part of your education, boss. Boss, you're on a highway, walking, some man comes by with a car, offers you a ride. You tell me what next, boss." And I say, "Always wear your safety belt." My dad says, "God damn, boss, you're a dead man walking. No, you don't wear your goddamn safety belt. You don't get in the goddamn car. Boss, you keep it up like this, you're gonna end up in 3 different garbage bags off of I-10. This ain't a merciful world." I say, "Yes, boss." My dad says, "Boss, even if that man aims a gun at you and says, 'Get in the car with me,' even if you're standing with the son of and he says, 'I'm gonna shoot you, I'm gonna shoot your little brother and his damn guinea pig,' you don't get in that goddamn car. If you gotta die, you die on the road. You don't know how good you have it, boss. You don't know how lucky you are. Nobody taught me self-defense." I wrap my arms around my dad then, and he lets me for a second. And then he shakes me off and says, "Quit it, boss. We look like a bunch of queers." My dad teaches me his own lessons because he doesn't trust the education that I'm getting in 4th grade at Jefferson Davis Elementary. At the beginning of 4th grade, Mr. Murphy came into class and he looked us all up and down and he picked me and Cubby and Cracker Teresa to be in gifted. So every Tuesday and Thursday, the 3 of us would get to go out of Miss Walker's class and into Mr. Murphy's gifted trailer. Mr. Murphy's gifted trailer was painted glossy black on the walls and the ceiling fan, and he'd covered the whole thing with glow-in-the-dark stars. Mr. Murphy would turn the lights out and he would turn the fan on, and the whole room just lit up. And it was like we were planets orbiting the sun. Mr. Murphy told us that everyone on the earth are made up of atoms. And Mr. Murphy says that even after we die, there's always going to be some atoms that stay on and that get reconstructed into something new. So after the dinosaurs died, a few of their atoms stayed on and are now maybe in tree bark, maybe in our thumbs. So he says this could be smoke from a Civil War cannon here, a grain of sand from India here, the mighty Tyrannosaurus right here. And Mr. Murphy says there's no way to know what parts of us will fade away and what parts of us will stay here forever. Part of the great mystery. And then Mr. Murphy got arrested for having the largest collection of child pornography ever seized in state's history, and that was the end of Gifted forever. And after that, we just had Miss Walker for everything. Miss Walker took over Mr. Murphy's trailer because she liked the glow-in-the-dark stars, and her old trailer smelled like pee from everyone who wasn't gifted. Miss Walker would stand over my desk and squint at me and say she always knew there was something off about Mr. Murphy. And she said he'd been wrong about everything else, and no way in hell could I be gifted. So she sent me to the nurse to take an IQ test, and I came back 70 IQ, which is bad. It's lower than a lot of me and my dad's clients. I know about IQ because IQ is a mitigating factor in a lot of me and my dad's cases. So IQ measures how strong you're able to take pieces of information and arrange them into a pattern that tells you an answer. My dad's first client from before I was born, Ted, had the highest IQ of any of our clients, somewhere between 124 and 140. If you ask Ted, it was more like 160, but that's up to you if you want to believe Ted. But Ted, IQ 124, 140, would bandage his arm, and he would ask girls to help him put books into cars, because his high IQ was able to arrange the information that a nice girl in the Florida Panhandle would help a broken-armed man, would have no cause to fear. Our client, Christine Beauty Queen, with all the babies in Jupiter, had the lowest IQ, 60. And all she could put together was that our current president was Abraham Lincoln. And Gary Dwayne Atkins had an IQ of 79. Gary Dwayne killed a bunch of people like me, like my mama in the Panhandle. And Gary Dwayne Atkins, if they hadn't caught him, he'd have driven right up to me. He could have asked me if I needed a ride. And Gary Dwayne Atkins is 9 points smarter. In fourth grade, my enemy is Betsy Ann Huff. So about half the white people in our town have the last name Huff, and they say they're not related, but The Huffs are in our town what the cats are in our house. They're everywhere all the time, and there's so many of them, and everybody's just trying to put them out. There's so many Huffs in town that at this point it's more of a word than a family. You can use the word Huff in a sentence if you say, can I go out in this, or do I look like a Huff? At the beginning of the year, Betsy Ann was crying, and Miss Walker asked her what was wrong, and Betsy Ann pointed at Cubby and said, he called me a Huff. And Miss Walker said, well, honey, you are a Huff. And we never saw Betsy Ann cry ever again. And now Betsy Ann waits for me every day after school, stands right in front of parent pickup, and she punches me in the softest part of my stomach. I always try to tense myself up, but she's too fast. For part of my education, my dad tries to teach me to fight back, but I can't hit fast enough. And finally, my dad says, at ease, boss. Boss, don't fight back. If you're in danger, just go down soft. Because if you're soft, she's going to see that you don't have any fight in you. And the predators, boss, they're not excited by the slaughter. They're excited by the fight back. On Wednesdays in 4th grade is show and tell. And Betsy Ann Huff stands before 4th grade. She's standing on a table, and she's holding the edges of her shirt. Betsy Ann Huff says, show and tell. I have the heart of a grown man. It's because when I was 7, I was climbing on a fence, and I fell on the fence post, and it pierced my heart. I could have died, but God had a different plan. The same day, the same hour, over in Live Oak, a man fell off a construction, and they gave me his heart. Betsy Ann pulls her shirt up, and she's wearing a dirty white training bra. Betsy Ann's scar is white and raised up. We all put our hands on her scarred man's heart, and we feel it beating through her chest. Her heart pushes back against our palms. Betsy Ann says, all y'all with y'all sorry baby hearts, And Betsy Ann goes to sit down, triumphant, because she has just won show and tell. Excuse me, I'm just gonna. And then it's my turn for show and tell. And I stand before 4th grade, and I show the only thing I have. I take my leg and I put it on the table, and I say, show and tell. This is a hookworm. It lives in my leg. I say, I got hookworms from all the goddamn cats. Me and the son of both did. Hookworms crawl up into cuts in your feet, and you can see their outlines like fossils against the skin of your leg. And I've had this one a few weeks because no one's had time to take me to the clinic. Miss Walker tells me to sit down because she says I'm ruining her appetite for lunch. So I'm on my way back to my desk, and Betsy Ann gets up and brings her arm back to punch me in the stomach. So I go soft. And Betsy Ann hits me in the stomach, and I melt right into the floor, and my left arm hits the floor crooked, and I land on top of my arm, and suddenly I am white-hot light. I lay on the floor soft while Miss Walker calls my daddy, and everyone is quiet while we wait except Betsy Ann, who says, Huff. And we all know it's true. I am the most Huff of anyone here. My daddy comes through the door holding his .38 special. Miss Walker says to him, bless her heart, 70 IQ and hookworms, and now it looks like she broke her own goddamn arm. Miss Walker says, gifted my big old butt. My daddy puts his .38 special in his pocket. He throws me over his shoulder, and he kicks open Miss Walker's door to the parking lot. In the parking lot, my dad throws me in the passenger seat, and we listen to George Jones all the way to the hospital. My dad says, what you crying for, boss? And I tell my daddy, I want to be gifted. Daddy says, 70 IQ is no problem, boss. You know who you're like? You're like the great George Jones. George Jones had 70 IQ when he was drinking. Little known fact. My dad is technically not allowed to drive because of his dead red eye and his detonating heart, but he does anyway. And we careen through the red hills and church billboards for miles as I stare at my broken arm. The exit for the hospital is on the right, so my dad misses it the first time. And then I start praying. I don't know how to pray, so I keep saying, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And I don't know what I'm asking Jesus for. Jesus, don't make me go back to the hospital where my dad's heart blew up. Don't let me die a huff. Don't make me go crazy with pain and the son of has to shoot me like old Yeller to end my suffering. Daddy says, hey, what'd I tell you? No crying, no Jesus. Don't give up on me, boss. Daddy aims his good left eye on the other side of the highway, over the divider, and my dad says, this goddamn broken eye and your goddamn IQ and all these goddamn Jesus people, they can go to hell, boss. Don't pay attention to them. Pay attention to me. I'm the boss man. My daddy swerves. The truck climbs over the highway divider and we land solid on the other side of the highway. I can see Wakulla Baptist Hospital on the bright horizon. Daddy aims his truck straight at the hospital and steps on the gas. His right arm wraps comfortingly around my shoulder, his right hand clutching his .38 Special. His left arm stretches out the window and gives a finger to everyone honking at him. But Daddy doesn't have time for any steering wheel. The wind blows bullets off the dashboard and my hair blows straight out behind me. We are a latter-day Belle Starr and Jesse James. My dad swerves into the hospital parking lot. He throws me on his back and he makes his way towards the hospital entrance. At the gateway, my dad grabs my good arm and he holds my fist up. And George Jones and the atoms swirl around us, and we orbit the sun. And my daddy says, boss, don't pay attention to those fools. Pay attention to the boss man. You, the champion of all time. You, the king of the dinosaurs. You like the great George Jones. Come on, man. And he kicks open the door, and we cross the entryway into all the white light. Thanks, guys. So these are, this story is, these series of stories take place over a year in 4th grade, and, sorry, I'm so dry. And it follows this one death penalty client that my dad had that would send us drawings and letters, and I ended up, I don't know, it's about him and sort of how that changed my relationship with the world. But that doesn't even have anything to do with this next story I'm gonna read, but I just wanted to share that. So this next story is called There Goes a Daisy Girl Scout. After Gary Dwayne Atkins got sent down the road, my dad started spending all of his time on death row, trying for stays of execution, clemency, all that. And minors aren't allowed on death row, and my mama was busy teaching painting at the women's prison. So they put me and the son of in the only free child care available, which was Daisy Scouts. Betsy Ann Huff's mama, Mrs. Huff, ran Daisy's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at First Baptist. And we couldn't afford any uniforms, just sashes and t-shirts. And on the front of the t-shirt, it said, "Here comes a Daisy Girl Scout." And on the back of the t-shirt, it said, "There goes a Daisy Girl Scout." And that always put great fear into my heart because it seemed like the shirts were made not for the daisies, but for the people we'd be running away from. Before Easter, Miss Huff wanted to take us up to Blood Mountain for a weekend. Blood Mountain is more like a hill behind the Swanee Swifty Mart. And my daddy didn't like the idea of us going into the woods because so many of his clients had been apprehended there. My daddy wanted me to take his .38 Special, but my mama said no. Up on Blood Mountain, Miss Huff says it's every daisy for herself. And it's true. I know that if some maniac with an axe came for me in a tent, Miss Huff would just sleep right through it. So we're spending the night on Blood Mountain, and here are 3 reasons I'm not going to sleep tonight. 1, I am scared of a man with an axe in the woods. 2, I am scared for my dad living on death row with all that electricity flying around. 3, when I am scared at night, sometimes I pee on myself. I say 3 because Miss Huff is making me share a tent with Betsy Ann. Betsy Ann says, "You stay over there with your sorry bedwetting self." And Betsy Ann makes me sleep on the very far edge of the tent. That night, I think of my dad alone with all the electricity, and the murderers running around, and my mama somewhere without her gun. And I wake up and I see that I've gone and peed all over the whole sleeping bag. Correction, I've gone and peed all over the tent. And Betsy Ann gets up and she shows me that I got some pee on her too, all over her favorite David Allan Coe shirt. And I know Betsy Ann's gonna hit me in the stomach and tell everyone that I'm a bedwetter, and I'm gonna lose the only 2 friends I have left. I know it's all over for me. And Betsy Ann looks at me a long time and she says, "I don't got nothing to say to them sorry baby hearts anyway. Quit worrying, I don't tell nobody nothing." And for the rest of the night, Betsy Ann teaches me how to fight. She teaches me how if the great enemy ever attacks, you turn your body to the side so they can't get your heart. Miss Huff gets us all up out of the tent to go on a hike. And Betsy Ann stands with her big self in front of me during the roll call so no one will see my pee stain and I'll be shamed. And when we're on the hike, she stomps circles around me so I'm protected from all angles. When we're hiking by the creek, Betsy Ann gets down like she's helping me tie my shoe, and she pulls me down with her. And then she pulls me behind a big tree, and we both hide while the entire troop marches right past us. And Betsy Ann says, "I stole $5 off of Monique, and we can go to the Swanee Swifty and get a bubble tape. But you can't go to Swanee Swifty covered in your own pee." And so we go into the water and wash the pee stain off me. And Betsy Ann reaches down into the water and she pulls up a fistful of red clay. And she paints our chests and faces and arms with clay. And she says, "Protection against the great enemy." Me and Betsy Ann get to the highway and we realize we don't know which way is the Swanee Swifty. A truck pulls over and it's a man, looks like the country singer Alan Jackson. And he looks us up out the window and he says, "Y'all need to go somewhere?" And I say, "Swanee Swifty." And man looks like Alan Jackson says, "I can take y'all Swanee Swifty." And he opens his door and he holds out his hot, dry hand and we climb in and slam the door. The truck seat is hot plastic. Our red clay is falling off us and drying onto his truck seat. And I'm scared he's gonna yell at us for making it dirty, but man looks like Alan Jackson didn't say a word. Man looks like Alan Jackson doesn't tell us his name, so I start thinking, maybe this is the real Alan Jackson picking us up, taking us Swanee Swifty. Wouldn't that be neat? But then the man looks like Alan Jackson keeps his eyes on the road and says, "Y'all two fool around for money?" And that's when I see how yellow and saggy his skin is. This isn't Alan Jackson. I don't even know who this is. I've messed up my dad's education, and now look what I did. I'm gonna end up in 3 different garbage bags off of I-10. Me and Betsy Ann, I just made us dead man walking. I lean up against Betsy Ann, and I feel her man's heart jackhammering away, and I can feel all Betsy Ann's words go away. So I soften, and there is no shield between me and this yellow man in a pickup, and that is the only protection me and Betsy Ann can have, that he sees there is no fight back in me. The yellow man says it again, "Y'all fool around for money?" And I say like a breeze, "No, sir." We are on a long stretch of highway with ditches. I say, "We're going to Swanee Swifty." We are quiet a long time, and then in a flash, we are right at Swanee Swifty. We're in the parking lot. The yellow man stops behind a truck full of watermelons. One of the watermelons is cut in half, looking sweet, and the truck's back door is open, inviting you to climb on up, eat some watermelon. The yellow man leaves the engine running, but he points to the door, and we say thank you, and we get out of the truck, and we walk into Swanee swiftly, soft, We don't look back. Betsy Ann buys a great bubble tape. She tears it in half, and she gives me the piece that's bigger, and we don't tell nobody nothing. Thank you.